Pat Thurston, let's check in with Paul Rogers. He's here with the news. It's 7 o'clock, KGO, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland.
Thank you, Pat. Here's what's happening around the Bay Area and the state. Protesters have taken down their tents at an encampment on the UC Berkeley land plot in Albany, but say they plan to continue farming the crops they've planted there. The university filed trespass and nuisance lawsuits against more than a dozen of the Occupy the Farm protesters who've been camping and planting vegetables on the agricultural research site since last month. California is facing a sea of red ink. Governor Jerry Brown announcing today that the state has a $16 billion budget deficit. Brown pointing out that new figure is nearly $7 billion greater than the $9.2 billion estimate he announced earlier this year.
Tax receipts are coming in lower than expected, and the federal government and the courts have blocked us for making billions in necessary budget reductions.
The governor passed along the bad news via YouTube, saying in a video, quote, "This means we'll have to go much further and make cuts far greater than I asked for at the beginning of the year." KGO traffic in San Jose, a two-car crash is blocking the left lane on 101 southbound before Capitol Expressway. In Sonoma County, it's slow on 37 eastbound between Lakeville Road and Infidian Raceway because of an earlier crash that's been cleared. Santa Cruz Mountains, Highway 17 northbound after Bear Creek Road, a crash has been moved to the shoulder, but it's stop and go from Laurel Road. Now's your chance to win a spectacular 99-second shopping spree at the 99 cents only stores. It's easy to enter. Go to facebook.com/99 cents only and submit your original design for their next reusable shopping bag. Good luck. KGO weather, clear tonight, lows in the 50s. Tomorrow, partly cloudy at the coast, sunshine inland, highs in the 70s, pretty much throughout the whole Bay Area tomorrow. Right now in San Francisco, it's 56. I'm Paul Rogers, KGO 810.
From ABC News, I'm Todd, and ABC News has learned that authorities have told the father of missing Tucson 6-year-old Isabel Celis that he cannot have contact with the girl's two older brothers who are now in custody with their mother, Rebecca. But a source close to the investigation stressed that the new development does not mean that investigators are turning their focus on Sergio Celis and the disappearance of his daughter. 11 al-Qaeda militants were killed in southern Yemen today by a U.S. drone in two separate attacks, according to Yemeni military officials. Republican frontrunner Mitt Romney sat down for an interview today with the Christian Broadcasting Network's program, The Brody File.
Good evening. I'm Pat Thurston, your host. Let's talk a little bit about J.P. Morgan. The Financial Times reported last week J.P. Morgan Chase announced a surprise $2 billion trading loss on credit derivatives trading, which Chief Executive Jamie Dimon blamed on errors, sloppiness, and bad judgment and warned could get worse. The shock disclosure made after the market closed on Thursday in a regulatory filing prompted renewed calls for tougher regulation. Investors reacted by sending the bank's shares down by more than 9% when Wall Street opened on Friday. Other U.S. banking stocks also suffered sharp falls. Let's talk about J.P. Morgan. Professor William K. Black is joining us. He's the author of that wonderful book, The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. He teaches economics and law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. He was the executive director of the Institute for Fraud Prevention from 2005 to 2007. He's taught previously at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin and at Santa Clara University, where he was also the Distinguished Scholar in Residence for Insurance Law and a visiting scholar at the Markula Center for Applied Ethics. He was litigation director of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, deputy director of the FSLIC, SVP, and general counsel on the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, and senior deputy chief counsel, Office of Thrift Supervision. He was the deputy staff director of the National Commission that investigated the cause of the savings and loan debacle, and he recently helped the World Bank develop anti-corruption initiatives and served as an expert for OFHEO in its enforcement action against Fannie Mae's former senior management. Now, I give you that bio because I think it's important to recognize the credentials that Bill Black comes to us with. Professor Black, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Well, I want to know from you what happened with J.P. Morgan. Can you put this into some sort of way that even I can understand it?
Well, we can, but with the following caution, and that is that we don't know fully, and the story being told doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Uh-oh.
So, subject to revision as we discover. So one of the primary messages is that these kind of derivatives remain incredibly opaque. And they remain incredibly opaque despite the passage of Dodd-Frank because, and J.P. Morgan Chase, in the form of Mr. Diamond, has been the person fighting the most effective action against the regulation. One, they've stalled the regulation, and two, they've created a loophole in the regulation that, as Senator Carl Levin said, is so large you could drive a Mack truck through it. In this case, a $2.3 billion and counting Mack truck.
Now,
right through it.
Let's stop for just a minute. The derivatives that we're talking about, I mean, when we've heard derivatives previously, it's been in a pretty ugly context and largely responsible for the economic failure that happened in this country and around the globe and from which we continue to suffer. Are they the same instruments that they were trading in previously?
No, but again, caution that we don't really know fully what they've been trading in because the rules aren't in place, and it's still amazingly opaque, which is horrible. Just there's no defense for that. Here's what is reported,
okay, and
probably has some degree of truth. First, despite the fact that the Volcker rule in Dodd-Frank is all about trying to prevent the huge banks from trading large amounts of financial derivatives for their own account, what we call proprietary or prop trading.
Okay.
Despite that fact, that's exactly what J.P. Morgan does.
Wow.
And it does it probably more than anybody in the world, and it probably does it to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, and in nominal derivative terms, probably trillions.
And how much money are they making out of that kind of activity?
Well, sometimes they make money, and sometimes they lose money.
But is this $2 billion? I mean, is this like a drop in the bucket to them?
No, $2.3 billion is real money, even the scale of J.P. Morgan, and its stock has suffered a significant loss. Overall market capitalization is down many billions of dollars because of this. And so it's a real bad thing, but it is, pick your cliche about tip of the iceberg. And again, they're saying they've already suffered $2.3 billion and that they have continued exposure that could cause additional losses. So here's what they seem to have been doing with those cautions in mind.
Okay.
They seem to have been taking huge positions in financial derivatives and with lots of exposure to Europe. And as your listeners know, Europe hasn't been exactly going well.
Right.
Austerity has put the entire Eurozone back into recession and has put the periphery into Great Depression levels, where unemployment's over 20% in a number of these countries, and youth unemployment, and youth goes up to 25 years old, is over 50% of the population. So J.P. Morgan Chase has been losing lots of money, one assumes, from its exposure to Europe.
What does that mean, though, exposure to Europe?
Well, they had various bets. Again, we have no information on this, but they have underlying positions, either because they've sold credit default swap protection to protect various positions in Europe, or because they bought other derivatives in which they're exposed to loss if Europe goes bad. At least one assumes that that's the direction they're taking the risk. Now, because then they decide that, Our risk exposure is massive, and we've got to do something about it. Now, here's a part of the story that doesn't necessarily ring true.
Okay.
And they say, so what we've got to do is hedge it, hedge our risk. Now, a hedge is I take an offsetting position. So if I lose in one position, I gain it back in the other. That's the protection of a hedge.
Okay.
Except that, of course, they didn't do real hedges. And this is the Mack truck loophole. So Diamond and his buddies, running the systemically dangerous institutions, the 20 biggest banks, got something through that said it doesn't have to be a real hedge. It can be, like truthiness, the Colbert word. It can be hedginess.
Hedginess, okay.
Right. It doesn't really hedge, but hey, we'll pretend that it hedges because we'll say we intended to do it as a hedge, and we might even say after the fact when things went badly that we're pretending it was a hedge. Anyhow, they supposedly purchased derivatives that price off of an index of credit default swaps. So credit default swaps are guarantees. They're called insurance, but that would be another one of those fake words.
Yeah.
They're not really insurance. So it's simply a guarantee I buy, typically from another big bank. And so this index puts together a whole bunch of these credit default swaps and says what's happening to them in the marketplace. Now, you can understand that doesn't work as a hedge against any particular bad investment because it's an index. It's too general.
Right.
It can't work as a hedge inherently.
And it
which
didn't,
is why the
apparently.
accounting rules don't let you call it a hedge.
Right. Yeah. Which makes complete sense. Tell you what, I've got to take a break, and I also want to open up our line to our listeners at 808-0810. But there are a number of things that we need to talk about when we come back, like, isn't this kind of what got us into trouble in the first place? And where are we in terms of regulation and re-regulation? And is this now going to actually cause real regulation to take place? And I'd kind of like to know how we got here in the first place. I mean, how did we trade much differently between Glass-Steagall and Graham-Leach-Bliley and then after Graham-Leach-Bliley? Let's talk about all of those things when we come back and maybe even get in a little austerity as well. Professor William Black is my guest. Our number 808-0810. I'm Pat Thurston, and this is KGO.
When it matters to you, Ron Owens is talking about it. Weekdays 9 to noon on KGO 810.
Barbecue season is here.
Or how to keep from driving all over to get the best deals. At Safeway, we know the drill. Got car, must find low prices. But guess what? You've got something more useful than car keys. It's called your Club Card. Each week, it'll get you sale prices you never thought you could get anywhere. Like a sweet price on Honey Nut Cheerios. They're just $1.88 for the 12.25-ounce box. That's a nice way to start the day. 12-ounce bags of Starbucks coffee are only $7.77 each. That's less than a quarter for a great cup of coffee. And right now, get creamy Greek yogurt at a price that's equally delicious. Fage Greek yogurt is just $1. 5.3 to 7-ounce sizes. Real big Club Card deals this week, new ones next week. When you're at Safeway, look around. You might find you won't have to drive around. Safeway. Ingredients for life. Club Card price is good through May 15, 2012.
Hey, when do you crave the refreshing taste of iced tea? Twisted Tea wants to know. After mowing the lawn, at a barbecue, on a really hot day, think about that same satisfying glass of iced tea, but with a kick. Twisted Tea is a hard iced tea that's made from beer, but tastes like real iced tea. And nothing satisfies like an ice-cold Twisted Tea. The next time you and your friends are looking for some refreshment, but you need a little kick, grab a Twisted Tea. The refreshing hard iced tea that tastes like real iced tea.
Twisted Tea Brewing Company, Cincinnati, Ohio. Drink responsibly.
As a small business owner, you've probably heard how Constant Contact helps small businesses grow with email marketing. And you may be asking, could it really work for me? Well, consider this. Every $1 small business owners spend on email marketing puts $40 back in their pockets. So it's no surprise that 2 out of 3 of them plan to invest more in email this year. Now you may be asking, how can I get a piece of that action? Simple. Just visit ConstantContact.com to start your free email marketing trial today.
when news breaks.
Former BART police officer Johannes Meserly is trying to get his conviction overturned.
Hear it live on the all-new KGO 810.
I always love the feel of sweat on my shirt. Stand back, son, and let a man work. Let a man work. Is that so wrong? I woke up this morning shackled and drawn. Shackled and drawn, shackled and drawn. Pick up the rock, son, carry it on. What's a poor boy to do in a world gone wrong? Woke up this morning shackled and drawn.
Good evening, I'm Pat Thurston. So we're talking about the story that came out the end of last week, and it was about J.P. Morgan and how they had lost $2 billion. And as I read this, I find myself rather confused because I thought that we had sort of put this genie back in the bottle. I didn't think this sort of thing was continuing to go on. But as my guest, Professor William Black, is telling us, J.P. Morgan was a key player in putting in loopholes that would allow this kind of trading to continue and allow this kind of risk to be out there. Now, hey, but what does this mean to us? That J.P. Morgan lost $2 billion, is it like, oh, too bad, guys, you shouldn't have done that? Or is this going to have some broader impact?
Well, it depends whether we wise up and take this as the warning shot that it is, and do something now that should have been done. Well, it should have been done, decades ago, but certainly should have been done in response to this crisis. So you knew that things were going very bad with Dodd-Frank because it didn't do two one-sentence things. One sentence should have been, the Commodities Future Modernization Act is hereby repealed.
Right.
And the other should have been...
That's Graham-Leach-Bliley, right?
The Graham-Leach-Bliley Act is hereby repealed. Instead, we get this 2,600-page monstrosity of the Dodd-Frank bill. And, of course, complexity is what the industry loves because they have the staying power, the attorneys and such, that are going to win this in the battle of where you put the commas and the ampersands and things like that.
Right.
They'll put little things in that will create massive loopholes and will gut the effectiveness if you allow them to play this kind of game. And here, the administration wanted them to play this kind of game. In other words, Treasury, Geithner, always opposed the Volcker Rule, in truth. And so Geithner has never met with anybody as much as Jamie Dimon. And Jamie Dimon, of course, was on the board of directors of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. He was Geithner's boss.
It's all incestuous. It's just unbelievable.
And it was an immense conflict of interest. And so all of the things we're seeing, we knew better than to allow these things 60, 70, 75 years ago. And we had a period that worked really well where after the Great Depression we did a real investigation, said this conflict of interest between the investment banking and commercial banking is terrible. You've got to separate them, and that was what Glass-Steagall did. It worked brilliantly, but the big banks hated it, and so it was the J.P. Morgans and such of the world that destroyed Glass-Steagall. And then when Brooks Lee-Born, the chair of the Commodities Future Trading Commission, and a real hero that people should know about, take a look for free at Frontline, the warning about this, gave the warning about credit default swaps, the things that help bring down the whole shebang in this massive financial crisis. Then J.P. Morgan was one of those infamous 13 bankers. That's where the title of that book comes from, by the way, who went to the offices of the Treasury Secretary, this is under Clinton, and said, you have to squash Brooks Lee-Born and any regulation of credit default swaps, which produced a complete disaster and a complete opaque disaster. And that's what really scared Bernanke and Geithner going into this crisis, because they had no idea who owed what to whom and how bad it was.
But
you would think they'd learn, but no.
Yeah, because you look at everything that happened, everything that we know now, and then they're still fighting the regulations that might be able to prevent it from happening again, and to happen like this with J.P. Morgan, but this $2 billion that may be even bigger than that and likely will be bigger than that. It seems like we didn't do anything really to prevent this from happening again. I mean, here we are. Everybody's tightening their belts. They're cutting back on everything. We can't hire teachers. We have to fire teachers. We can't get decent police forces and fire departments. Everybody's cutting back. It's killing people. People are losing their houses. And these guys are still going along merrily along their merry way, just playing fast and loose with money and with the economy. Because when they play with money, it tumbles economies.
In just the household sector, in this crisis, the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission found that they caused an $11 trillion loss to the household sector. A trillion is 1,000 billion.
It's a million.
Yeah, so what does it take? That's our phrase. What would it take to get serious?
Yeah. What would
and
it?
to actually do something about these things. So, specifically what they did, as I said, was say, you can do things that aren't really hedges, that don't really protect you against loss.
Right.
And surprise, that's what we've just seen here, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't protect them against loss. Okay. And you can pretend that it protects you against loss, and you can still do it. So here's the policy insanity. Why, from any perspective, liberal, conservative, moderate, why would we have a federal subsidy, an explicit one called deposit insurance, and an implicit one for the 20 biggest banks called too big to fail, which is even bigger than deposit insurance, the implicit subsidy, and say, take this federal subsidy and go out and buy financial derivatives with it. And then if you win, you become massively wealthy.
Right.
Diamond says that this was a product of idiocy. Well, the person responsible for these transactions makes over $10 million a year, and her boss is Jamie Dimon, who makes, in a typical year, over $20 million when you consider everything.
Right.
So we are paying for idiocy at the rate of $30 million a year.
Yeah, it may be.
These are the most prestigious people in the world, and they are, as they self-describe themselves, incompetent.
808-0810 is our telephone number. Bill, let's get a phone call or two from our listeners. Let's start with John. He's calling from Sacramento. John, hi. Welcome to KGO. You're on with Professor Black. Go ahead.
Hi, I appreciate it. I'm a retail broker. And we find this stuff just totally amazing. This trader has a trading portfolio of $350 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal. So a 2 or 3% loss in this thing, or a 10% loss in it, is a very small movement. And the question that I have is, if you buy stocks, you can only buy stocks on margin with a 50% equity rule. Why don't we do that to options and CDOs and things like this, where these guys have to put more money into it? It's affecting all of us right now with gas prices, and they're doing future contracts for pennies on the dollar in terms of equity, so they have absolutely no skin in the game.
Right.
Why don't the regulators and why don't people like you, sir, who sit on these committees, realize that the way to deflate all of this is make them get off a margin and trade with real dollars versus highly leveraged dollars?
First, I don't sit on any committees, and they sure as heck won't appoint me to anything that has any power, given my views. But second, yes, you're absolutely right. They exempt themselves from all of the restrictions we have found absolutely essential for safety. And they do so because of their political power. And the only way they're able to get away with it is this too big to fail doctrine, where the administration, and it's not unique to this administration, the prior one said the same thing, they're saying that when the next one of these 20 largest banks fail, and it's a question of when, not if,
yeah,
it will cause a global financial crisis. Now think of that.
But that's just
we are rolling the dice 20 times a day,
right,
to see when the next catastrophe is. These institutions are incredibly inefficient. They are vastly too large to be run efficiently. If you shrink them to the size that they no longer threaten the global system, they will also be more efficient.
Well, there's a great idea. I mean, you know, we broke up Ma Bell at one point.
Well, that's my triple proposal for the systemically dangerous institutions. Actually, I have a fourth proposal, which is to start calling them systemically dangerous. You'll not be shocked, perhaps, that the administration calls them systemically important, like they deserve a gold star.
Well, you know, it's just remarkable to me that we have not learned from our mistakes, that we have a government who is aiding and abetting these things going on when, you know, it can be so disastrous when they have these failures. And I don't understand why they do it. Why do they take risks like this with so much
let's start with the beginning.
But you can't, because
wait,
Bill. You can't do it yet because I have to take a news break. But we'll come back after the news break, and then you can do it. Now, don't forget where we are.
All right,
make a bookmark. All right, we'll be back with Professor Bill Black in just a moment. We'll get more of your phone calls as well. Again, the number 808-0810, 8080-810. And, of course, we're talking about what happened with J.P. Morgan, announced just this week, just Friday, is when people started understanding that it was $2 billion that they lost. And what were they involved in? These crazy derivative things once again. I thought that was something of the past, but no. Right now, let's check in with Paul Rogers. He's in the KGO Radio newsroom with this update. Hey, Paul.
Thank you, Pat. KGO News time is 7:30. California's budget deficit is worse than previously thought. Governor Jerry Brown announcing today the state is $16 billion in the hole. Brown points out the new figure is nearly $7 billion greater than the estimate he announced earlier this year. The governor blames the federal government and the courts, saying they've blocked the state from making necessary cuts.
The result is that we're now facing a $16 billion hole, not the $9 billion we thought in January.
The governor passed along the bad news via YouTube, saying the state is going to have to make far greater cuts than he asked for at the beginning of the year. 11 suspected militants linked to Al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula are dead after a pair of suspected U.S. drone strikes today. The strikes come as the Yemeni government launches a new offensive against the group. Rick Santorum is advising former presidential rival Mitt Romney to use same-sex marriage as a, quote, weapon in his campaign to unseat President Obama. CNN reports his remarks come just days after Obama announced his support for legalizing gay marriage. Police in Fort Lee, New Jersey are cracking down on people texting and walking. Yes, walking. They've begun issuing tickets to pedestrians, citing an increase in jaywalking incidents. KGO traffic in the Santa Cruz Mountains, Highway 17 northbound at stop and go from Glenwood Drive to Bear Creek Road because of an earlier accident. Richmond, stop and go on 80 westbound from Central to the Maze. This is after an earlier crash that's been cleared. Bay Bridge heading into San Francisco. It's backed up to the foot of the Maze. Metering lights are on. It's been bad pretty much all day since that movie shoot on the bridge earlier this morning. In-N-Out Burger. Stop by today for your made-to-order double-double. 2 100% pure beef patties, 2 slices of real American cheese, hand-leaf lettuce, vine-ripened tomatoes, all in an old-fashioned sponge dough bun. That's what a hamburger's all about. KGO weather, clear tonight, lows in the 50s. Tomorrow, partly cloudy at the coast, sunshine inland, highs in the 70s pretty much throughout the Bay Area. Right now, 54 degrees in San Francisco. I'm Paul Rogers, KGO 810.
When you read about it, it's history. When you hear it, that's news on KGO 810.
You know the TV show where some lucky family gets a complete home makeover absolutely free? I'm Larry Green, CEO of System Pavers, America's #1 installer of interlocking paving stones and outdoor living systems. Well, System Pavers is offering a free outdoor living space designed to all listeners who respond to this ad right now by calling 888-PAVE-002. Our design consultant will come to your home, shoot photos, and design your dream exterior oasis, complete with digital renderings, absolutely free. A landscape architect would charge thousands for a similar design. This spring, love your home again with our beautiful interlocking paving stones, SP Turf, fire pits, custom built-in barbecues, and wonderful outdoor lighting. Act now and take advantage of our most aggressive pricing ever and no interest for 36 months. Remember, this incredible free design offer is available to all listeners right now. 888-PAVE-002, 888-PAVE-002, or click systempavers.com.
Everyone's talking about Ovation Cell Therapy and how Ovation products are designed to maximize growth, strength, body, and shine for thicker, stronger, longer, and healthier hair. Ovation's natural products nourish your hair with proteins and amino acids to help reduce breakage and hair loss, creating visibly healthier hair. Grow your hair thicker, stronger, and longer, guaranteed, or you get your money back. Everyone's talking.
I had overprocessed hair, but Ovation Cell Therapy has brought my hair back to life. My hair is noticeably shinier, softer, fuller, more manageable, and just all around healthier. I feel like I'm doing something really good for my hair and myself every time I use Ovation.
For healthier, shinier, more manageable hair, log on to ovationhair.com and enter KGO 810 AM at checkout for a special introductory discount. Don't put it off any longer. Log on to ovationhair.com and enter KGO 810 AM at checkout for your special discount. Ovationhair.com.
Everyone's talking about Ovation Cell Therapy, and you will too. Ovation works.
With over 900,000 products in 31 product categories, some people would say Grainger has everything but the kitchen sink. Of course, those people would be wrong, because sinks are among the over 900,000 products Grainger offers to help keep your business up and running, along with belt sanders, baseboard heaters, duct tape, tissue paper, reversible air drills, and, well, you get the idea. Most everything. For super fast access to Grainger's over 900,000 products, call, click Grainger.com, or stop by a branch today. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Sound bites of the day with Kevin the Rat.
Well, that dirty word bounty reared its ugly head again.
This is not volleyball. This is not basketball. This is a violent sport.
A violent man-eating sport?
Only on KGO 810.
He's trying to find me. I'm standing in the middle of life with my pants behind me. I got a smile for everyone I meet. As long as you don't try dragging my bay or dropping the bomb on my street. Come on, baby.
Good evening, I'm Pat Thurston. My guest is Professor William Black, and we're talking about J.P. Morgan and this $2 billion loss. I'm looking at an article right now that talks very much about some of the things you've been saying, Bill, that soon after lawmakers finished work on the new financial regulatory law, the Dodd-Frank Act, a team of J.P. Morgan Chase lobbyists descended on Washington with the goal to obtain special breaks that would allow banks to make bets in their portfolios, including some of the types of trading that has led to the $2 billion loss that's now rocking the bank. The people who are calling into the program, there have been quite a few of them, what they want to know is, what can we do to stop this? What must we do to finally, cork this thing?
One, don't let them grow, the systemically dangerous institutions, the SDIs.
How do you stop that?
Right. J.P. Morgan, you forbid them. Thou shalt not grow, period. One sentence.
Okay.
If you're too big to fail, you are not permitted to grow.
Okay.
And they've been growing massively by doing things like acquiring Washington Mutual and Bear Stearns.
Okay, got it.
And Bank One, and before that, and J.P. Morgan before that, and such. So stop that.
Okay.
2, tell them that within 5 years they have to shrink to below $50 billion in assets. They can decide how to shrink. We don't have to micromanage that, but they have to get down below that level, which is roughly the cutoff where they no longer pose a global systemic risk.
Where they're no longer too big to fail.
That's correct.
Then we can let them fail.
Ultra-intensively regulate them in the interim, which means you're going to have to hire new regulators, because the leadership right now is not simply in bed. It gets too graphic with these folks.
I think we can imagine.
So just assume the rest of the discussion. So those are the things that you need to do, because right now, conservative economists agree with this. We have crony capitalism, not anything that warrants the term capitalism or free markets or any such thing. And conservative economists, for example, describe these systemically dangerous institutions when they are in competition with the rest of us as bringing a gun to a knife fight. That's an exact quotation.
Yeah, well.
It destroys the entire economy. And when you ask why do they do these insane things, it's because life is completely asymmetrical for them. It's all about their compensation systems, which, by the way, we have also failed to change after this crisis, even though it was the compensation systems that drove most of the perverse behavior.
Well, I was going to ask you if anybody...
Go ahead.
Will anybody's compensation be impacted by this $2 billion loss?
Oh, yes, but in small ways compared to the $2 billion loss.
Right.
And so what happens, well, the saying in the trade is that every trader's first option is on the firm. And by that, what they mean is if you take a really big gamble and you win, then you make a fortune. And as your caller said, the size of the trading portfolio, this is the biggest trading portfolio in the world probably. It's in the range of $250 billion, but that doesn't really count how big it is because of the weird way derivatives work. And again, it has very little capital backing it up because, as the caller rightly said, these people have enormous leverage. That means that if you take a really big bet and you get even a moderate win, you personally make a ton of money, measured often in the many millions of dollars. And that makes you extraordinarily wealthy. And then if other things go bad, well, you're still extraordinarily wealthy. On the other hand, if things go badly, you don't cause million-dollar losses. You cause multi-billion-dollar losses, and if you cause knock-on effects, which you can easily do with these systemically dangerous institutions, you can cause the failure of a whole series of institutions and the collapse of global financial markets, and then the losses. Again, it's so perversely weird.
Yeah.
They're trying to make $15 million. And to do so, they will risk causing trillion-dollar losses. But they don't bear, of course, the trillion-dollar loss.
Right.
We do.
Exactly. Listen, I've got a couple of emails here for you that I wanted to share. One comes from Valerie. She's very unhappy. She says, I hope you can see from this new crap with J.P. Morgan Chase why the U.S. people are so fed up with the government and so discouraged about everything, in caps. We don't stand a chance. The banks are about to screw us. Obama's extended our stay in Afghanistan till 2024. Gasoline goes up. Big cuts in Fed and state programs. The do-nothing Congress. We can't win, and it's out of our hands. We've been screwed again and again without even a kiss. I give up. Tell me why I should ever vote again. It doesn't make a tinker's damn who's in office or if he's a Democrat or a Republican. Screw this country. So she's kind of upset.
Well, New Zealand is very nice, I must say.
And this one comes from Reggie, who says, in the latest Frontline called The Banksters, in 2008, right after the big collapse, Obama summoned the big banksters to the White House. They expected a bloodbath backed with new regulations. To the banksters' surprise, Obama folded and asked the banksters, how do we control this PR problem, following Tim Geithner's advice?
Yeah, well, we knew as soon as he picked, he being President Obama, or the President-elect Obama, had Larry Summers as a chief economic advisor, that the economic side was going to be done very poorly, because these are the leading opponents of regulation who brought us the deregulatory bills under President Clinton. And Geithner, of course, was promoted because he was a failure, just as Bernanke was reappointed because he had been a failure.
I don't understand that. Why do you do that if somebody's failed?
Oh, because they will do whatever you wish to be done. That's the nice thing about people that don't care about getting it right.
Oh, that's great. This is really scary.
No, it is scary, and the caller, I would, the email folks, I would say in seriousness, you keep fighting because otherwise the other side definitely wins. So here's our motto during the savings and loan crisis, when I will tell you it looked far more hopeless than it does now. Remember, we re-regulated during the heart of the Reagan administration over the objections of the administration, both parties in Congress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a number of us are unemployed and unemployable in the federal government since. But,
but you did the right thing.
A catastrophe.
Right,
so our
exactly.
motto was, it is not necessary to hope in order to persevere.
Okay, all right. I suppose I can buy that. I'm looking at my clock here because I do want to talk with you a little bit about linking Wall Street's problems to austerity in Europe. It sounds as if there's a connection there, and Bill, to tell you the truth, it seems to me like we have a real problem because we see things, we put things into place, and somebody theorizes how great they're going to be and everybody's boats are going to be lifted, and it fails miserably. And instead of recognizing, okay, that failed, we can't do that again, we just jump right back in and try to do it one more time. Austerity in Europe isn't working, and yet there are people throughout this country who are calling for those austerity measures right here in the good old U.S. of A.
Yes, and to link it to your news story about the disaster in California, this is completely gratuitous, right? Didn't have to happen at all. And it's worse than what you say, because it isn't that we're simply following failed practices. It is that for 50 years we followed successful practices.
So we know how to do it right.
We know how to succeed. And therefore we do have to throw the bums out of their offices and get people back in who do what we know works. So,
all right, wait. Don't do it yet, because we have to take one more break. All right, so when we come back, you're going to tie it all together. Bill Black, my guest. I'm Pat Thurston. You can join us at 8080-810. You're listening to KGO.
Breaking news happens in your community. On Twitter, on Facebook. Hear it first on KGO 810. The all-new KGO features the worldwide resources of ABC Radio, plus an exclusive partnership with the Bay Area's top TV news department, ABC7, on your news and information station, KGO 810.
KGO 810 is a proud sponsor of the Golden Gate Bridge 75th anniversary, harkening back to the spirit of the Golden Gate Fiesta. When the bridge opened on May 27th, 1937, highlights of the 2012 celebration will include a historic waterfront parade, multiple music and dance stages, art installations, history and educational presentations, and a display of cars from 1937 to the present. The Golden Gate Bridge 75th anniversary is sponsored by Hewlett-Packard and Kaiser Permanente. For more information, visit the events page at KGORadio.com.
My wife saw little ants with wings on the bathroom floor. She said, "Clark, we need you." I said, "Hey, I know termites when I see them. You let me at them." So I hit the store. I get the stuff, cup of this, cup of that. Shazam, bugs gone. My wife said, "Just call Clark." Well, an hour later, the termites are back. Take it from a guy that's been there. Do it right the first time and just say, "You were right, honey."
Protect your home from termites and other harmful insects. Call Clark Pest Control today for your free inspection. Dial 1-800-WE-NEED-YOU or clarkpest.com. We present to you one Sally Mae Young, this day overwhelmed by half-used cans of bug spray.
I have bed bugs, too.
A conundrum and a cacophony of potential trouble.
You could say that again. I don't want my grandchildren getting into that stuff. I dialed the phone and pleaded, "Clark, we need you." Do bed bugs have rabies?
Get rid of all that potential bug poison under your sink. Call Clark Pest Control today for your free inspection. Dial 1-800-WE-NEED-YOU or clarkpest.com.
I'm Professor Burke from the University of Farmers, and this is a pop quiz. What's the best way to find out what your auto policy covers? A, smash your car up and see how much your insurance pays, or B, talk to a highly trained farmer's agent and see if you have the coverage you want. The answer is B. Please don't attempt A. That's just crazy town.
If you want answers about auto insurance, you want a farmer's agent. Find yours at farmers.com. We are insurance.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Coverage not available in all states.
The melodic sounds of Ferrari racing cars. Come witness race-equipped F430s, F458s, and Formula One Ferrari at full throttle. This weekend, Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca will provide that rare experience. Ferrari racing days are coming to Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey. May 18th through the 20th. Tickets start at just $25 and include free parking, access to the paddock, and grandstand seating. Children 12 and under are free. For tickets and information, call 800-327-7322 or visit MazdaRaceway.com.
Breaking news happens in your community. On Twitter, on Facebook. Hear it first on KGO 810.
Things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I want money. That's what I want. That's what I want.
Good evening, I'm Pat Thurston. I'm speaking with Professor William Black. You probably know him best from his book, The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. And I'm afraid he meant it. We're talking about J.P. Morgan, the $2 billion loss that occurred this past week. And, Professor, you were going to make this connection for us with what's going on in Europe.
Sure. So Europe has, as Paul Krugman says, has been promising that there's this confidence fairy. And if you just adopted austerity, that the economies would miraculously improve. Right. And Krugman and we at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and you can see it in our site, New Economic Perspectives, have been saying no. This is a disaster. It is completely illiterate in terms of the economics. A recession occurs because you don't have enough typically private sector demand, and now you're going to reduce public sector demand at the same time. You're going to cause a recession, and yes, the whole Eurozone has been thrown back into recession, the periphery into depression, an utterly gratuitous problem that did not have to occur but for this kind of dogma that passes for European economics. Here in the United States, we have our own version. What people, I think, forget is that the stimulus program, when it was announced and proposed by President Obama, had a significant revenue-sharing provision. And that revenue sharing is a good old Republican idea. And here's the key difference. The United States federal government is a sovereign nation with a sovereign currency.
Mm-hmm, right.
It is nothing like a household. And so it can and should run counter-cyclical economic policies in a recession. It should be spending more and perhaps reducing taxes, and that leads to much faster recovery. The alternative leads to a much deeper recession and bigger deficits.
Right.
But the states and localities are not like the federal government. They do not have their own sovereign currency. Their debt is denominated in another currency called the dollar.
Right.
So they are forbidden by state law and constitution in most places from running any significant deficits. And so revenue sharing was brilliant. We needed to spend more, and the federal government under Obama offered to say, hey, states, we're going to give you slugs of money. You use it in the most prudent way to meet your local needs. Right? Big-time federalism, American thought type thing.
Yeah.
And that would have prevented these state and local crises, which are causing all kinds of cutbacks and, by the way, are causing much higher unemployment because the public sector.
But who was opposed to that? Who stood in the way? The entire GOP?
The GOP and the Blue Dog Democrats, which is the phrase for conservative Democrats, for reasons that pass all understanding, guys decided that this conservative idea, revenue sharing, was some pinko communist thing, and they insisted on killing it. Now,
but what you were talking about earlier, Bill, about how a sovereign government that has its own currency is not the same thing as a household. You know, we kind of just pass that by. But that's a really important point, because the way this is being positioned politically is always if you balanced your own personal budget that way, or you could never do that. And people don't seem to realize it's really not the same thing.
It isn't at all, and it takes, a full hour-length program to even give it a decent explanation, but I will say, look at the work of my colleague Randy Ray, W-R-A-Y, on New Economic Perspectives, and my colleague Stephanie Kelton at New Economic Perspectives, and we have literally hundreds of pages explaining this, but I'll just give you the bottom line. Okay. For the vast bulk of the U.S. history, we have run a deficit, and people may note that we're an incredibly wealthy country. Deficits for governments are frequently healthy, and most assuredly, when you're in a recession or trying to recover from one, right, it is economically insane, self-destructive to adopt austerity. Austerity in those conditions is the equivalent of the old medical practice of bleeding the patient.
Right. Are we then, by the policies that we have been adopting, which are closer to austerity than anything else, are we prolonging the difficulties within our economy?
Yes. The stimulus package was far smaller than it needed to be, and this isn't aftersight. This is what economists said from day one. The revenue sharing provision was vital to prevent the state and local financial holocaust, and it hasn't happened. And by the way, the reason Texas is doing well has nothing to do with being conservative in its finances and everything to do with the price of oil.
Right.
All right. So, and we are about to, and there are places like the Peterson Institute and the Washington Post which are pushing to have us dramatically reduce the deficit right now through austerity, and they've just seen that it destroyed Europe.
Right.
And they don't even, I mean, it's nonsensical.
Well, who's influencing them? Who's causing them to take such a position? I mean, I think I pretty well understand what you're saying, and it seems like insanity.
It is. It's a very long-run conservative motif that says debt is morally evil and says a government must just be like a household. Now, if you think about it, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And by the way, we're not like corporations, but they never say we should be like corporations. Do corporations try to eliminate all debt?
No, of course not.
What is this leverage stuff we've been discussing?
Yeah, exactly. They have to be able to do that. I mean, that's what was one of the problems when we suddenly there was no credit available. That was one of the big problems. How are these corporations going to continue to operate?
Right. Do we have speeches when a corporation borrows money about how it's putting a terrible burden on the shareholders of the future and their children?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
No. I mean, all of this stuff is nonsensical in terms of a metaphor, but it's understandable in another dimension, and that is, what do we know as people? We know households. And so if we're going to make a metaphor, it's going to be from the thing we know.
Well, yeah, and seriously, when we start talking about derivatives and we talk about credit swap options, and I don't understand this stuff. It all seems like it's voodoo economics, well, to renew a phrase from the past.
The comment that people should know is Paul Volcker saying, just once, I'd like them to provide one shred of evidence that these things actually make the world better.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Is there anyone right now in the federal government, an elected official, who is looking at these things the right way and who is trying to take us in a direction that's going to be healthy for our economy, healthy for the American worker?
There are some folks in the Senate still, like Senator Carl Levin, and to some extent, on some issues, Senator Grassley. And even one of the conservative Republicans on Senate banking has called for a hearing into the J.P. Morgan loss, which is actually a fairly remarkable thing in terms of modern politics.
Yeah, that's a very good thing. What about Ron Paul and his ideas about our economy? Is he on the right track or the wrong track?
No, I mean, he's a fiscal
nut.
Deficit
you can say
hawk
nut.
who doesn't believe in any regulation at all.
Yeah. Okay, now let me ask you this, and we're almost out of time here, but who are you going to vote for in the election?
Obama.
Why?
Lesser of two evils, and the Supreme on a number of issues. I think Obama is vastly better on the social side, and I just absolutely fear what will happen to the Supreme Court. if the next appointees come from Romney.
Do you think if Mitt Romney were elected president, do you think that things would be worse on the economic front?
Yes, because he's completely hostile. I mean, his whole motif on the economic side is running as we have to gut regulation.
Right,
it's like
right.
They people have learned nothing.
I know, and it's like you said before, you've got 50 years of doing it right, 50 years when we knew. You've got to wonder how those people or those entities that have money to invest, why they'd want to invest in these companies in the United States where the regulation has been so decimated. It seems like that's incredibly risky.
It is indeed in this stupid Jobs Act, this farce that was supposedly about jobs and was really about making things even more fraud friendly for even very large corporations.
Right.
When the United States equities traded at a premium equities or stocks compared to other nations, precisely because our stocks were viewed as safer. Because of effective regulation by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Yeah.
Now, we haven't had effective SEC regulation for at least 25 years.
Yeah, and it's just incredible. Bill, I could talk to you for hours, but we're out of time, and I want to thank you so much. Where do you write? Where can people read the things that you write about here? There's your book,
Economic Perspectives.
New Economic Perspectives.
That's the blog of the University of Missouri, Kansas City Economist.
Okay, great. And again, we will refer people to your book as well. The best way to rob a bank is to own one. Bill, thanks so much for being with us. Always a delight to talk with you. And that's Professor Bill Black. All right, I'm Pat Thurston. Stick with us. When we come back, I understand that Amos Brown is going to join us. He just released a statement concerning liberty and justice for all. It has something to do with marriage equality. So he's going to talk with us about his perspectives on that. That'll be as soon as we come back. And we've got a number of other things on our plate coming up in the next